Okay. Welcome back to the FTN NFL Draft Prospect Series. I'm your host, Mike Randle. Follow me on Twitter at RandleRant. And we are back. We have covered quarterbacks. We have covered running backs here at the Senior Bowl. And we have brought in resident expert and tremendous, I'm going to call him the Senior Bowl Pope himself, Jeremy Popielarz here from FTN, who does tremendous work, just a vault of knowledge in his brain. And he is going to talk to you today about the Senior Bowl wide receivers that you should be keeping an eye on as we inch closer to the NFL Draft. Follow him at Popes FFH. Jeremy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, and thanks for the kind words. Much appreciated. But yeah, I'm excited. Wide receivers are pretty good. Another one, like we mentioned, running backs yesterday. The wide receiver group's pretty deep at the Senior Bowl this year. Pretty exciting. We saw a couple days now of practice, and they've been living up to the hype. So I'm excited to talk about them.
And I am getting a front row seat here about the wide receivers because they can really make an impact. It's a landing spot where you can be at the right team, right quarterback, but there are a lot of diamonds in the rough here that we have seen come into the NFL. And if they land on the right team, they can make a big, big impact. So we have 5 today to talk about, as well as a couple at the end that we're going to mention a little bit. We will start out with the Houston Cougars here, Jeremy. Nathaniel Dell, a little bit under 6 feet, undersized, but certainly a big producer.
Yeah, for sure. Nathaniel Dell, a.k.a. Tank Dell, another pretty sweet name out there, similar to Tank Bigsby, good old nicknames. But yeah, he weighed in at 5'8", 163. So he weighed in shorter than what he was listed at, but he came in a little bit heavier, which is also a plus. I think that the being a little bit heavier is a lot better than being the undersized in height, because Dell just is the worry would come with the war of nutrition there is if he can hold up to the NFL level. Still going to question it. Still very much the undersized. However, he's had back-to-back 1,300-yard seasons and double-digit touchdowns in both of those seasons. He finished his career in Houston with 3,155 receiving yards and 32 touchdowns. So some pretty gaudy numbers there for an undersized wide receiver. However, he was playing in a spread offense. He gave him a lot of space, allowed him to use what he does best, which is speed. He's an electric playmaker. He's quick. He's twitchy. He's got that top-end speed, but that top-end speed also opens up everything for him. We're seeing it already in the Senior Bowl in the one-on-one drills. The DBs have to respect that speed so much he can drive them off, and he doesn't have to be perfect breaking out of his break there on the curls and comebacks and dig routes, stuff like that, because he can drive them off with the speed, and he's very fluid. I mean, it's not super crisp, but he's not terrible either. He's a decent route runner. But again, it's going to be that size, the strength, and he does kind of struggle in the contested catch area if he ends up in that situation, because again, he is only 5'8", 163. Strength, the biggest issue there. If he lines up against a little bit of a taller or stronger cornerback who can line up and match his speed.
Have you thought of a receiver in the past? I mean, have you seen this trend with undersized receivers who maybe aren't great route runners, let's say, but carry that incredible speed? Is that something that you've seen maybe some of the stars of the Senior Bowl of the past develop when they get to the NFL? Because honestly, you can't coach speed. And like you said, if they're giving him space, even if he's not the greatest route runner, he can still get open. But in the NFL, it's a little bit different.
I think the struggle is really going to be the size. I don't think we've really seen many 5'8" wide receivers come in and be these high-end type, we'll say, quote-unquote, fantasy type wide receivers where they're seeing a ton of usage, a ton of production. I think he's going to be a great weapon NFL-wise. I think that you can use him in a versatile way. You see it kind of with my home team in the Bills, like Isaiah McKenzie, a little undersized, a little quick, quick outs, kind of just a little bit more versatile. These way to kind of use his speed and kind of get him open and then just kind of run with the ball. And McKenzie's not even that fast. So you could see Tank Dell kind of in that kind of same category, but just much faster, John Ross-esque. Ross was a little bit bigger and not always the best person to compare to because he didn't really pan out completely, but kind of that field stretcher that there'll be an opportunity. I just don't know where, but I think he gets drafted a lot higher than some of these other guys just because, again, like you'd mentioned, speed kills. We've seen it all over. The NFL's going that way, that quick kind of spread speed type offenses on as many teams as you can count right now in the NFL. So I'm going to say that he gets drafted a little bit higher than a lot of people think, even though he is undersized.
Next up, we'll go to BYU here. Great name. Puka Nacua. Have him a little bit over 6 feet, 200 pounds here. Transfer from Washington. So talk to me about Nacua here at BYU.
Yeah, he measured in pretty close to what he was listed at 6'1", 206. A guy that I'm probably a little bit higher on than the consensus I have been for the last little bit. Kind of had injury issues throughout his career, but it comes with just his physicality. You know, he's sturdy, but he's a hard worker. He's a tenacious player, but he has that physicality to his game. This past season, he had 834 scrimmage yards. Nothing like, wow, eye popping, but 625 of it was receiving, 209 rushing. So he's got that dual threat ability, like I had mentioned, where they kind of can use him in any type of situation. He has a good vert at the catch point, so he can play above the rim pretty well. He also has really good vision when he goes into that run game type mode or creating after the catch. He had 7.4 yards per reception of yak per Pro Football Focus last season. So a guy that really is just explosive after the catch. He can make guys miss. And again, that physicality carries over. He's okay with running guys over, getting a little physical with them. He actually, amongst the bigger names in this draft class that I have the information for at the moment, he actually leads the wide receivers with 3.53 yards per reception per Pro Football Focus. So another guy that's a pretty good metric. A lot of people like to use that fantasy wise and even in the NFL. So a guy that I think has kind of balled out in these first 2 days at the Senior Bowl. A lot of people have a lot of highlights of him, a lot of talk around him just because of, again, the body control, the route running ability. He just kind of has it all. And I hate to like throw a comp out there and have people really ride me on this, but he reminds me a lot of Deebo Samuel. I put it out there. I put it on the podcast. Same thing. He just reminds me that he could have that Deebo Samuel type role for an offense at the NFL level. So I'm kind of excited to see how he finishes out the Senior Bowl and see if he can kind of rise up there in that draft stock.
Listen, comps are what people like. They want to be able to visualize. I get it, but if you're right, that's going to be a great call because certainly Samuel has been very versatile, a versatile weapon, which is what you're basically saying Nacua can be here from BYU. Next up, a bigger, more prototypical wide receiver that you see here with the frame, the athleticism, 6'3", a little bit over 200 pounds, Rashee Rice from SMU.
Yeah, this is going to come down as one of my more disappointing weigh-ins. Rashee Rice actually only came in at 6 foot 200. Wow. So he was listed 3 inches higher at SMU. So he really still falls into a decent size range, but really not that 6'2", 6'3" to above there where you kind of quote unquote say is that prototypical X wide receiver type role. A little bit more down into that like Stephon Diggs size range. So still can be productive. We've seen it at the NFL level. But just not really up that bigger type of receiver. But he still does. He's still got a sturdy frame. He's a little bit thicker. He was third in the nation last year with 1,355 receiving yards. In his career at SMU, he had over 3,000 receiving yards, 25 touchdowns, and over 233 receptions. So he was basically a workhorse in that passing game for the SMU team. But he's very versatile, too. He played in the slot and out wide, something that's going to be good when he transitions to the NFL. He's not really already limited in college, so that's a good sign. That gives him better opportunity to stick at the NFL level. If he can't win outside, they can easily move him into the slot, and he can probably get the job done there. But he has good acceleration, especially in his deep type like go routes, field stretching routes. He does well there. Pretty fluid in his routes. However, they're very limited. He wasn't asked to do a lot. He played in that spread style offense similar to Tennessee where they didn't have a ton of routes. You know, it was kind of like a couple field stretching routes, whether it was like a 9 or a post. And then you had some little underneath stuff, nothing too crazy. However, he has looked pretty good in some of the clips that I've seen from the Senior Bowl already in the first couple of weeks. So I'm creating some decent separation there on like some in routes and stuff like that. Nothing crazy. However, he's pretty good at yak. Usually makes the first guy or two miss. Again, another one had over 6 yards per reception in yards after catch. But he kind of struggles with drops, which is kind of wild. It's not like crazy. But he did have 9 credited from Pro Football Focus, which was like 8% of his targets. So not super high. I've seen worse, you know, like Christian Watson had like 14% last year. So like, it's not like crazy. It's just kind of a little bit something to kind of monitor, I would say.
Well, we have another player now in Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, listed again, 6'3", over 200. So tell me how he measured and how you think Hutchinson here will pan out in the Senior Bowl and potentially draft.
Yeah, Hutchinson is one of those more versatile guys. He's not going to wow you really in anything, but he's just kind of good at everything. He did come in at 6'1", 207, so he was pretty close in that kind of same range as Rashee Rice. However, again, 2,900 yards receiving, 15 touchdowns, and 254 receptions at Iowa State this past season. He had career highs with over 1,100 yards and 107 receptions. Both were tops in the Big 12. So highly productive because this was also his third season in a row leading the Big 12 in receptions. So he's been kind of another one of those type of workhorses for this Iowa State passing game. Real good off the line. Has a versatile and decent amount of package releases that he can kind of use and kind of set up his defender to help himself beat them, because he doesn't necessarily have that long speed and that super explosiveness in his routes once he's off the line. So if he can get the step on you there, he creates decent separation. He does well on some other routes because he's pretty fluid. But again, he's not like a crazy separator, not super twitchy or explosive. And does well in contested catch situations. So even though he's not separating, if the ball's tossed up to him, he tends to do pretty well. So Hutchinson seems like a safe kind of wide receiver type. But again, he's probably going to be your third or fourth round type wide receiver, maybe even the fifth he could fall to, just because he's not overly exciting. I saw someone kind of comp him to like a Robert Woods type style player. Kind of makes sense. I don't know if he's as physical or as good of a blocker, really. Decent blocker, but not. I don't know if he's as good as Robert Woods was. So, but a similar style player if you wanted to put him in a category.
And the last guy who transferred here from LSU and joined Nebraska, talk to me about Trey Palmer.
Yeah, Trey Palmer exploded when he joined the Cornhuskers. Set a single season record for the Cornhuskers with 1,043 yards. This was 500 more yards than the next closest pass catcher in that offense. So he was another one. Kind of a workhorse there for the Nebraska offense. Came in at 6'1", 190, so a little undersized, but has good height at 6'1". He also led the team with 9 touchdowns. This guy's going to be another one of those speed kills type of guys. He's speedster, stretches the field really well, smooth mover in and out of his routes. He's not overly sudden, but he has some suddenness to him, a little bit more than like the other guys that we had just mentioned. And he creates good separation, mostly again, speed based. He's quick in and out of his routes, which allows him to get a good first or second step on the DB and gets, that quick separation, not necessarily like it's more just like that, I don't know, kind of the middle, quick, open type of separation, but he's not really like, I don't know. He's not like Kadarius Toney. There's it. I was trying to find a name. He's not really like he's out there all twitchy and kind of hard steps in his routes. He's more of like a smooth mover that creates that separation.
Less juke, more smooth.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, he's limited in his routes. Again, it was another guy that he was kind of pigeonholed as a college player just because he was so good at stretching the field. And that's kind of the role that Nebraska used him in. So again, he's just limited in it. I don't know not saying he can't run these routes. We just haven't seen it yet. So a guy that I'm a little less excited about, but I could see him again getting drafted a little bit high just because of that speed and that dynamic playmaking ability.
Well, those are the 5 main guys, and I think you have a couple extra here, sort of later guys who could splash, or maybe you've heard something already. Give us a couple more names here, wide receivers that you're hearing good things or bad things about down there at Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, the Senior Bowl, like I said, is pretty loaded. We got Charlie Jones is down there. He had a big year out of Purdue. Haven't heard too much so far, but he's a decent route runner. Had a ton of yards, over 1,300 yards this year, leading the Big Ten for Purdue. But the most noise that I've heard so far is Jaden Reed out of Michigan State. He's down there. Another one that didn't really produce a ton. Not that Michigan State's offense was overly productive in the pass game, so most likely why. But he's out there, and he's doing really well. Seen a lot of good package of his releases. He's kind of mixing it up pretty well and getting quick separation off the line. There's one clip already of him just leaving a guy in the dust. It's pretty intense. You should look it up. I have it on my Twitter, so you can go on there and check it out because it was exciting. But yeah, I'm excited about him. I think he's going to see a huge bump in his draft stock if he continues what he's doing over there. Ronnie Bell, a little bit less exciting so far in the first couple days, but another good, productive over 600 yards for Michigan Wolverines this year. Princeton has Andre Isovius. Not really sure if that's pronounced right. I'm sorry if it's wrong, sir. But over 900 yards for Princeton this season. He's kind of shown some pretty good things so far. Good body control along the sidelines. He has a catch out there that's on some of the clips, extending the sideline. Something that I like to see. He has that good wide catch radius. Nice play that he made on the toes on the ground and reaching over the sideline, kind of extending the field a little bit. So it's whether he catches it or the ball just hits the ground. On top of that, there's Dearius Davis out of TCU. Haven't heard too much on him so far. Jonathan Mingo, a guy that I like. I liked him last year out of Ole Miss. A little bit of kind of like a versatile do-it-all. Nothing overly exciting type wide receiver. Trey Tucker on Cincinnati. Jalen Wade. Devontae Wicks has a couple of nice routes out there. If you want to head to Twitter and search his name with the Senior Bowl, he looked pretty good so far. Elijah Higgins. And then Michael Wilson out of Stanford. Wilson has another good couple clips out there. Really good off the line for Wilson so far at the Senior Bowl, creating quick separation and leaving some guys behind. So there's a lot of names out there. A lot of these guys, I think, kind of fade in the draft just because there's not been so much talk. But I think Devontae Wicks, Isovius, and Reed are three names to really watch out of this group that I just mentioned that I think you could see kind of have a little bit of a boost come draft day.
Yeah, we've seen this before, folks. People come in, you have players come in, Jalen Tolbert last year, Kyle Phillips, who can come in and really make an impact, and all of a sudden there's an injury or two, and they're thrust into the limelight. So their speed, their measurables, what their real height is critical here. And Jeremy gave you a great breakdown of the wide receivers at the Senior Bowl. Fantastic job as always, Jeremy. We will return, folks, with our tight end prospect series here with the Senior Bowl for the NFL Draft. For FTN, Jeremy, the Pope himself, I'm Mike Randle. We'll be back with tight ends.